Welcome back to Reflections with Coach B. This is part 2 of our 3-part series on the power and peril of real estate partnerships. Last time we broke down 3 successful examples of partnerships to try to figure out what made them tick. But for every partnership that thrives for 5 years or more, I've seen 10 or more fall apart. Here's something that might surprise you. In preparing for this episode, I spoke with over 20 agents who had been in partnerships that didn't work out. I invited them to sit down with their ex-partners across the table from each other to share their stories. Can you guess how many agreed? Just 2 out of over 20. Thankfully, a few brave souls were willing to share their experiences with us anonymously to help other agents avoid the same pitfalls in the future. More on that later. First, let me introduce you to one of the 2 partners who did agree to sit down face-to-face with their ex to talk about how it all came together and how good things went bad. Hey, Coach B here. Wouldn't it be nice to know if a partnership is a good fit for you before investing all that time, money, and energy into one that ultimately doesn't work out? Well, you're in luck. We created a quick and easy quiz called How Partner Ready Are You? Based on all the incredible insights we got from our interviews for this project. And that includes the successes and the failures, even the epic ones. If you want to take it for a spin, you can find the link in our show notes on my website, bradenwheatcroft.com, or DM me the word partner1 on Instagram. That's the word partner, all lowercase with the number 1 on Instagram. Okay, let's dive into the episode. We are going to pick up with Andrew Holenchuk, a realtor in Victoria, BC, who came into the real estate industry from a fairly safe job. And yes, that was a bank joke.
I came from a role in the banking world of being quite competent to all of a sudden being a realtor. I went from feeling very comfortable to uncomfortable very fast. I was stressed out. Print advertising is spending like a couple $1,000 a month because that's what we only had access to without the use of social media, and not having a regular pay and being strictly commission pay. That has its pros and cons. And being a one-income family, you have to go all in on yourself. My debt increased very quickly, but that motivated me quite a bit. It was just an uncomfortable time, but very exciting, all wrapped into one. I just went all into everybody I knew. So everybody I've ever known in my life, I knew I had to let them know I was a realtor because I had a lot of good connections. And I just went all in myself and went all in on the contacts and had a listing before I had my license basically all lined up. That was just from me being proactive and letting everybody know, hey, I'm a realtor, I'm your guy. I think my first year I did about 140 grand. And then the goal was to keep building from that.
Andrew's success as an agent continued from there. Over the next 8 years, Andrew's business grew to the point where he was one of the most productive agents in his brokerage. He was very busy, but he never really wanted to get into a partnership in his real estate business, mostly because of a bad experience he had in a previous partnership as a young entrepreneur.
To be honest, I didn't want to form any partnerships, just to be straight up. I had businesses before in my 20s when I owned a pet food company, a courier company, aromatherapy company that we all started from scratch, and that ended in a divorce. So I was very gun shy for partnerships. We looked at each other going like, hey, let's start a business. So then we started distributing pet food. And then we got it into 30 stores within like a year when it was 1 store before. And then we're like, screw this. Why don't we work with a nutritionist? So we developed our own pet food company in line, and we had cat, puppy, dog food within a short period of time. And then we got in like 60 to 80 stores. We're expanding across Canada. And then we're going around with all these cube vans that were half empty. And then we thought, hey, let's start a courier company. So we analyzed that. Then we created the courier company. And then we did all these home shows promoting everything. And then we saw this aromatherapy business that was kicking ass. And then we bought them out. And then we had malls that we did them at Christmas time and all at the shows, and it was just a gone. But you have all that energy in your 20s, school hard knocks, so you're just all in on yourself, like just building that dream. So that's when we started those businesses. It was messy. Those businesses I technically should have retired at the end of my 20s, and there was a wrong decision by the business partner, in my opinion, that impacted that situation.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That was the approach Andrew took as it related to forming a partnership in his growing real estate business. But an accident he had in the gym not only changed his life, but his entire perspective on his business.
The reason why my brain shifted to start thinking about creating a team or teaming up with someone, I got into an accident and it was at the gym. a machine malfunctioned and I got launched and I shattered my radius bone and herniated 2 discs. And I couldn't walk without crutches. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sit. It was a tough time in my life. Things were going sideways pretty quick with the health side and mentally and just my business because I couldn't walk upstairs. I couldn't do a lot of those things. And my wife the whole time was like, you need to team up with someone. You need to team up with someone. I'm like, no, I can't. Like, I don't want to partner. I don't want a partnership again based on what I've been through in the past. I couldn't do my job properly as a realtor. So with that in my ear quite a bit, I started looking at who do I see and who do I recognize that has the same attributes, the same quality, the same integrity.
And so Andrew was on the lookout for someone he could see himself working alongside. And it was actually at a brokerage event where he found someone he could see a fit with.
It was actually the awards ceremony at the golf course in the following spring. And Andrew introduced himself to me and he was considering partnering. He's like, let's go for coffee. And I was like, I'm not into this. I'm not interested in being on like working with other people. I'm going to do the solo thing. And he's like, hear me out, man. Let's go for a coffee. That's where it started.
This is Jeff Meyer, who at the time was completing his first year in the real estate business. Unlike Andrew, Jeff did not come from an entrepreneurial background. He came from an educational one.
I was an electrical instructor at Camosun College. I was a teacher quite a few years. I had a back injury. So I was like, I can't do the physical work. When my injury happened, I needed something less physical. So I ended up applying at the college to be a teacher and I got the job, was doing that. But I can't stand in front of a whiteboard and teach magnetism and physics. I was bored. And even just standing in front of the whiteboard was hard on the back. I couldn't just sit there and teach. I had a friend introduce me to insurance. He was a successful auto insurance guy. He gave me the big fat book to read. And I was so bored. But being from the electrical industry, having construction background, I knew houses, I knew the product. I liked marketing. I liked the idea of the insurance because of the business model, but I would not be passionate about the product. So I sat on the couch and thought about what I wanted to do. And I went on the Solder UBC website, read all the, don't get your license unless. I read all that and I was like, I'm doing this. I was like, I'm all in.
You were the rookie of the year, so that was a year into your business, right?
I think he might have come sat beside me and we're like, hey, we should grab a coffee. I don't think we talked about anything. And I think that was like the first time we talked.
And then I started connecting. I don't know if Jeff and I did a deal or we just started connecting a little bit more, but I started recognizing that Jeff is a really good guy. And I felt that he had also a lot of potential as well. And then seeing he got the rookie of the year, obviously that stands out. Stars aligned in that regard. But I was very cautious, but I was in a very vulnerable situation because I couldn't do the things I was doing, but I needed someone that had the energy, that was aligned, the availability, and felt that I could grow with. Everything just kept on going back to Jeff because of the character and the integrity and who he is as a man. Right? Like it's nice seeing people like are accomplished. Rookie of the year is not taken lightly. Obviously, he's a cut above than the most, right, for transactions. And again, just as a human. And it just reconfirmed that I don't have a choice. I do need to do something. And who do I do that with? And at that time, it just made sense for me to start talking to Jeff further about it.
And from those early discussions, a coffee date was set to connect and create the vision for their potential partnership. But there was also a mentor and mentee dynamic developing too.
I can't stand Starbucks coffee.
I'm always a green tea, latte, matcha type.
He got me hooked on those, by the way. He's pretty much like, okay, here's the deal. I'm wanting to work with you. And I was like, I just came out of this like team thing and I'm kind of I was doing pretty good. And I was like, I'm not really interested. And he was like, okay, man, well, like didn't really want to be in a partnership or anything either, but here's my situation. And I think I just kind of went home and thought about it.
I remember that just looking back at that time as a whole, that I needed to create a partnership that I felt comfortable based on the situation that I was under physically and mentally. And for me, it made sense to align with Jeff just because I felt that the direction he was going in made a lot of sense and felt that he had a lot to offer. And if it wasn't going to be Jeff, then I would have to obviously start looking elsewhere. Over time, obviously, it made sense. We went into it with a lot of faith.
Not much time passed after that coffee. Well, the green tea matcha latte meeting finished before Jeff and Andrew found themselves sitting around the boardroom table at their brokerage, building on the foundation of their first meeting when an unexpected call came in.
I think it was pretty quick. I don't remember like a lot of time going by. I remember we met in the boardroom and we're sitting at the table and we were talking about what it would look like. And my phone rang and it was the chair of the electrical department at Camosun College. I was like doing substituting. I was full-time, but it wasn't a full-time position, if that makes sense. He offered me a full-time position and it's on speakerphone and Andrew's across the table looking at me and I can see his lips move like, what the F kind of thing. Like, this is bull crap. Like, here he is trying to like maybe work with me and this guy's offering me this full-time job. That moment, I don't know if you remember this, Andrew, I quit my job on speakerphone. At that moment, I said, I declined the position. And this is my 2 weeks notice. And I hung up the phone and I reached over and shook Andrew's hand and that's where it started. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. The key is like, you can't go into a partnership if someone's
not all in.
Yeah, you got to be all in, right? I knew there was a connection there and that was going to take them away a little bit. So that was one of the things that we were also chatting about because you got to be all in.
Jeff and Andrew took a more organic approach to setting up their partnership. They looked at their own unique strengths as well as Andrew's very real physical limitations.
We had written down like some splits and a bit of structure.
Well, when we connected, we had our own strengths and we were at different points within our profession. I was more weighted on the listing side. Jeff was not at that time. For me, I needed help with the listing side because of where I was at physically. And I needed help on the buying side because of where I was at physically. And that's where I was like, well, we can complement each other as well, because I can show you everything I do with listings and so forth and get him all caught up and comfortable. And then also he could support me in various areas. So that's why I felt it was a good fit at the time. And it made our splits a little bit unique as well, just because, again, our businesses were at a different stage.
Mm-hmm. Like just volume and experience. I really liked the marketing and like design and stuff like that. Andrew had like all his stuff. He was old school. He had a binder and he had newspaper clippings. He had the name, the Victoria Property Group, which was a great name. I liked designing logos and marketing and design. And it wasn't even like an agreement, like Jeff's responsible for this or this. I just kind of came in and was like, hey, let's take what you got and just kind of clean it up, let's go get more digital. Social media was pretty new. Like no one was even running Facebook ads back then. So I just kind of came in and complimented just naturally just with the stuff that I'm passionate about and the stuff that I enjoy doing. So I just kind of took care of some of that kind of stuff, I guess. But his phone was ringing. Like he had like 20 listings or something on the board.
Yeah, I had a lot of business that I just knew that over time, I can't say no. And so the problem is when you're physically limited for a period of time and you don't want to say no, it just became a lot more stressful.
He had the listings. I could go host open houses. I was like available. He had something that I could like leverage to learn.
100%.
Right.
That's why complimenting each other was key. We can
like
have
listing
the same
presentations. You would do those and I could come and sit in on them and learn that, right?
So unlike most partnerships we see start off at 50-50 split of income and expenses, Jeff assumed the role of junior partner and Andrew as a senior, and their splits were set accordingly. And although this was meant to be fair and equitable for both parties, it did start to wear on Jeff a little.
Well, and there's even times too, there was like, you were pretty stressed out sometimes because the amount of business that was coming in through my side, you felt that it wasn't quite even. It was like, Jeff, don't worry about it. Like we're playing the long game.
I always wanted to be fair with him. Like I don't want to take advantage of people. So I'd be like, man, I'm not holding up my side. This was the beginning. It changed after a while.
Then that was the nice thing because at least like with Jeff, he recognized that and it weighed on him a lot, right? Because a lot of the business at the beginning was from my side. And I was always like, we're playing the long game. Your stock is high, Jeff. It's only going to get better. And I knew over time, everything would catch up and everything would be good.
It definitely felt like he was investing in me. My goal was to make sure that his investment paid off, right? Like I wanted to make sure that worked.
That was really important to Jeff.
I just knew that he was investing in me and I knew that he was bringing a lot to the table. But I felt motivated and a desire to perform.
Andrew was playing the long game, investing in Jeff. And Jeff felt a strong motivation to make sure that Andrew got a return on his investment. This divide and conquer approach galvanized the relationship and set the stage for a lot of growth, especially on Jeff's side of the business.
Even though I was not doing as much business as Andrew in the first year, I was, compared to like other new agents, like I was killing it. But he, like 20 listings on the board, it wasn't comparable to him. I was still doing really good. So I had a positive mindset. And then when it was kind of starting to kill it, out of like maybe after about a year and a half there together, I think year 2, I started catching up. We did like, I think a year end. We used to do a year end, like, and we'd put all the numbers on the board and stuff. I don't know why. The teacher in me was like, let's write it out on the board.
I was like the student behind the chair here.
He was like, I didn't do any of my research. I'm like, well, you just got to trust me. The numbers that I'm showing you are like, I'm not faking it, right?
Yeah.
So I'd say it probably kind of caught up around the 2-year mark. We're killing it.
Jeff reflects on his early success on how being connected in the community helped him catch up to Andrew in production, while also being really involved in the operations of the team.
I just know a lot of people. I've always been very like a bit of a social butterfly as far as like I've worked for a lot of companies. I've been to a lot of churches, being a teacher. I've always been a networker. I've always been someone people go to like figure out things or need something done. I've been a middleman to connect people. So when I'm a real estate agent, all of a sudden people know this. There was a lot of transactions to be had out there back in the day. When you have someone that people like you and people trust you, it was just like, well, let's just go with Jeff. It started feeling to me like we're equal partners with expenses. And I feel like I'm doing more of the business management, like taking aside from the sales themselves, I'm putting more into the branding and the trying to grow the business, which I was kind of spearheading a little bit. Mostly just because I was passionate about it. I wasn't expecting.
You were really.
I just was like, hey, I have an idea. Hey, check this out. And he'd be like, that's cool. That's awesome, right? That was just something I was passionate about. So then what happened like later on is when you start getting to we're kind of starting to get really close here with the money we're both bringing in. We're both spending the same amount of money, but I'm doing all this extra stuff. And the whole time since we first met, our conversation was, we're going to start out with these types of splits, but over time, we're going to work towards, eventually our goal was to be equal partners. Kind of looked up to like the Hatter King guys. But because I was a junior, it was going to take time to do that.
So now that this 2-person partnership was firing on all cylinders, they needed to bring in more support to keep up with demand.
We had an assistant as well.
I think we brought her on around the 2-year mark, and then we had her kind of into that 3rd year. And then it was the next year end where it kind of fell apart.
As their strong 2nd year came to a close, Jeff and Andrew found themselves reviewing the results at their year-end planning session. But things didn't go as planned for Jeff.
This is like Christmas time of the end of the 2.5, like right before we start year 3.
That initial meeting was on my son's birthday, December 21st, because I remember that. At Remax, in this building.
In the old boardroom, right? The year-end meeting where we did our, like a little evaluation, Jeff's whiteboard. I went into this meeting like, we're killing it. I'm like thinking we're going to freaking grow. Let's take over this town. We just got a buyer agent. We got an assistant. I'm looking at the data. I'm like, oh, this is sweet. We need to bring on more agents. And I put all the numbers on the board. I had killed it that year and was kind of showing him like, okay, we're like at the 3-year mark here. We were really close. We were only 5% off of being equal partners at the time. And I was basically pitching to him, are you ready to do this thing to 50-50?
Yeah, I was a little triggered, I'd guess, based on my previous relationships in other businesses. I started getting a little bit concerned. I always have this reoccurring thought in my head when I started my pet food company and everything else, my account going, partnerships don't usually work. It's going to cost you in the end. And then all of a sudden I went from like thinking I was going to semi-retire in my 20s and then that failing. And I just wasn't ready yet. My son's birthday is just a little ways away, right? So I wasn't as present as I probably should have been. Because of over time with the splits changing, I felt that I knew exactly where Jeff was going with wanting to change the splits. And I don't think I was quite ready for that yet. Was the easiest way to say it. Hey, if it's going to be, because we've done a number of changes with our splits that, hey, here's another one. And then is there going to be another one? And for the first year, because I do remember like there was times that there was a lot of business coming through my funnel and Jeff would always get a piece of it. I do think, and I don't want to speak out of turn but it felt like that Jeff felt a little bit guilty that it wasn't as much money coming from his side than my side on certain months. With that being said, in my mind, fast forward, I felt, and I could be wrong, but I felt that there was more time needed to be doing some top ups versus what happened in the past. And at that time, I wasn't ready to entertain that in my mind. And I felt that I started shutting down mentally, in the sense I wasn't as open-minded as probably I should have been at that time. Even like during my injuries and stuff, like I had even lawyers on the other side going, Andrew, you should go to counseling. And I was like, I'll just go work out or just exercise if I can, right? Like it's just, I'd hold that stuff in, which I shouldn't.
And I think it scared him a little because I was always the one planning the meetings too. I did homework and he kind of would come in and so he's caught off guard because he hasn't seen any of these numbers. He has no idea what I'm going to say. I didn't tell him what we were going to talk about. He just shows up and I'd stand at the whiteboard and I'd color code it all. It's never fun asking for a raise, right? Like we had changed our splits every few months, every 6 months or whatever. We'd have a little evaluation and he'd be like, I'd pitch it and then he'd agree and we'd negotiate and we'd, another five. And we worked our way up. So this was like the last one. So it's kind of just like worst case scenario to me was that he just said no or wasn't feeling that, right? I didn't sense he would be upset or anything, but anytime you're saying, so I want you to give me more money, who wants to do that? Yeah, it was December 21st. Yeah. And he was like, whoa, like this is a lot kind of thing. And then we set another meeting.
It's birthday for my son, it's Christmas, and I just felt that I needed time for a pause, reflect, and let's connect after Christmas.
Yeah. Just like all the other meetings, it's just like, hey, well, did the thing and ball's in his court, and hopefully he sees that I'm not looking to take over the business. And that's really just, to me, I was really asking, just if we're talking about a 5% shift in finances and nothing would change structurally or anything. And I thought he'd be stoked to, like, even leaving the meeting, he was always, I need time. I never had red flags like, oh, that didn't go well. I was looking forward to our next meeting to talk about it.
After his son's birthday and Christmas, Jeff came to the second meeting ready to pick up where they left off. But Andrew had a reality check for Jeff.
I went to the meeting. I would say I felt I was in a completely different place than where Jeff was at going into that meeting on the 26th. When we saw each other in the parking lot, Jeff was like his normal, vibrant, good energy, man. We're taking over the world. We can get our own broker, like kind of thing. Like we're taking over, like we're going to do really good.
Let's do this thing.
Yeah. And then in my mind, I'm like, oh God, I'm going to blindside him. Just to be straight up, right? Because my mind was different, right? Because I think I started going like, oh man, like I had in the back of my mind, like what happened in the past with other partnerships. And then part of me is like, well, if there's going to be this renegotiation, then there's going to be another one in 3 to 6 months, and then another one in 3 to 6 months, which again, that's not fair for Jeff because that may not have been the case. I wasn't ready at that time to make that decision. And I felt at that time through my own lens, I wasn't prepared to do that.
So we sat down. It was a very, very short meeting. Well, you had your mind made up already.
I had my mind made up.
Yeah.
And I knew that as soon as I saw Jeff in the parking lot, where he was at was completely different than where I was at.
Yeah.
So I came in with my checkbook prepared.
I was like, so, because the ball was in his court. I had said what I had nothing to say, right? I was just waiting for a response, really. I don't know how exactly he said it, but he said, I think that it's best if we go our separate ways or something like that. And I was like, what? Right? Like, because like, if he wasn't down with the pitch, I was still expecting like, let's revisit 3 to 6 months, or the answer is no on the equal partnership, but everything else still the same. Or it felt like, you're dating a girl for 10 years, you propose to her, and not only does she say, I'm not ready to get married, but you get dumped. That, right? It was like, oh, we don't need to break up. We just might not get married yet. So I was totally like not expecting that. Right.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Because it was like, he even brought that like, hey man, like we could work through this. We can do all these things. And at that point, when I look back, that wasn't fair what I did to Jeff. Right. Like, I should have talked it out more. But in my mind, I think I felt that I didn't want to go through what I've been through in the past with other partnerships. And I felt if I broke up now, how hard it is to break up now, it'll be even harder down the road because we're going to be more invested with each other down the road. That's where I felt that it's either going to happen now or it's going to happen in 3 or 6 or 9 months. And I wasn't wanting to go through even a harder time then.
When he said that, I was in shock. Like, I'm not going to try to talk you out of it. And it went into, well, what does that look like?
And in what is seemingly a bizarre sequence of events, Jeff and Andrew pivot from planning their next big year in their partnership to parting ways, in what may be a very shining example of how well they work together.
I'm like, we have an assistant. What happens with her? We have assets. What happens with the stuff? What happens with our office? Who gets the name? Who's keeping he's like, I want the team name. I want to keep everything. And I was like, what does that look like? And we basically, in the boardroom right then and there, we like wrote a list of all the existing deals we had. And within like an hour, we basically did like a spreadsheet of assets and liabilities. And we came up with a balance sheet, and he was like, here's the difference, and cut me a check, and I drove home.
And it wasn't fair for Jeff. I blindsided him.
Since their partnership breakup, Jeff and Andrew have gone on to build successful businesses and now operate teams of their own on Vancouver Island. I thought it was incredibly brave for them to meet with me and share their stories. But the reality of the situation is their story is not all that unique when it comes to partnerships in real estate. As I mentioned in the opening, I was able to speak with even more agents who were once in partnerships for very candid, off-the-record conversations. We jumped onto Zoom so my AI note taker could fully transcribe our dialogue for future reference. But I had a problem. After so many anonymous meetings, I had way too much data for me to process by myself. So I turned to technology and a computer scientist to help me out.
My name is Hoang. I am an international student here. And I actually just graduated from UVic like 3 weeks ago, and I studied computer science.
Julia has assisted me in a few different projects in the past, usually to do with leveraging AI to help make my marketing workflows run smoother. But this was the first time I was going to use tech for research purposes only. Julia defines the scope next.
So the scope from my perspective is to create a custom ChatGPT bot that could analyze the text transcript from your interview so that we can answer a few key questions that you cover in each of the interview and have a report on them. We have a total of 15 transcripts to work out of. It was actually like almost like 16 hours of audio. And when I tried to ask ChatGPT to count the word counts on the transcript, it was like 137,000 words. That is like excluding the timestamp and like speaker identification on the raw transcript. That's a lot. So we have like that background, and we got the outline that we can work off. So I feed that instruction to like a custom bot GPT and say, okay, please read each of these transcripts and analyze what was their background and what was their summarized answers to each of the questions. And using that bot, I run it on each of the transcript because didn't want to load like 15 transcripts at one point because it would overwhelm ChatGPT and it would lose out on important details. And so that's why I ran that bot like 15 times to generate like a 1 to 2 page summary for each interview. And then from there, I feed them into each category of like the 3 types of interview that we have and ask them to make a report for each batch of interview. And then at the end, bring them all together. So I gotta break it down step by step.
I know that 16 hours sounds like a lot, and that's because it is. But believe it or not, the majority of the hours of audio were centered around 3 basic questions.
The 3 fundamental questions that we asked them was, first, what attracted you to a partnership? Second, why did your partnership fail? And the last one was, what advice would you give if someone asked you about getting into a partnership?
So there was Julia with over 137,000 words, a research budget, and a brand new chatbot. She started breaking down our first question, what attracted you to a partnership? And right away started seeing some patterns.
There is like a common pattern. The most common reason where people would want to enter a partnership was support and collaboration. And I feel like it really makes sense where many agents felt that like 2 heads are better than 1. And they believe that a partner could help brainstorm solutions, share ideas, and manage clients' relationship more effectively. And sometimes they also shared that working in real estate can feel isolating if you're going solo. And so several agents also were drawn to partnership for a chance to avoid that loneliness of working solo. Other common reason as well that I was to share workload and achieve work-life balance, which I find is really interesting because I know that even from an outsider, it's pretty hard for like real estate agents to balance their work life and their personal life. And so they enter the partnership in hope of achieving such balance and having the ability to like split the responsibility, and particularly in like demanding roles where they want their clients to be able to feel that they're covered all the time when they're on vacation. Another reason was like to getting the complementary skill sets, and they want like partnership like would allow agents to combine and capitalize on different strengths, making the business stronger. For example, like one partner might be really good at client relationships while the other focus on like marketing or staging. And so it just makes sense that they combine the strengths together and really boost their business. They also mentioned was a cost sharing and efficiency. And for example, they could share resources from assistant to like marketing expenses, which makes their running business like more efficient and cost effective. And at the same time, they could allocate their budget into, say, market visibility and improve that. Another reason, this is one of the unique insights. Some of the agents shared that they were thinking about their future. And so like partnership were also like a way that they could find succession planning and gradually handing off their business into another good hand.
This all seems to make sense to me. Who wouldn't want support and collaboration, or to feel less lonely when working, and the ability to fully disconnect when they're away? Or maybe they found the peanut butter to their jam regarding their strengths and weaknesses. And expense splitting? Yes, please. But Julia was surprised that something wasn't mentioned in our interviews.
When I was looking at this question, I felt like as an outsider, when I saw this question, I thought one of the reasons where people might enter a partnership was to set the stage for growth and expansion. But I was surprised to find that not many agents had that in mind when they started a partnership, as opposed to they were looking for a way to share the current workload. I know that also helps to expand the business gradually over time, but it was rare for agents to have the goal in mind to really accelerate growth by partnering up with another agent.
Now that we understand the main motivations for agents to partner up, let's turn our attention to why they crash and burn. Julia explains.
The analysis also caught me by surprise because the most common reason why a partnership failed was because of imbalance in contribution and workload, which I would get into, like, it totally makes sense, but I would have think that financial disagreement would have come first, but it was actually the part where it was the imbalance in workload. When they recognized that, they had to pick up more work, but their recognition and reward doesn't quite reflect that thing, over time, this imbalance led to resentment. I would say that I view it also as the level of commitment. Yeah, I know that in an ideal world, we're like reward for whatever that we contribute equally. And the second common reason was misaligned values and priorities. So sometimes when partnership progress, agents often found that themselves and their partner had different values, goals, and lifestyle priorities, which also caused friction. It wasn't necessarily that they didn't align these values and goals at the beginning of their partnership, but at different life stage, things change. Sometimes the line between their professional life and their personal life is kind of blurry. It's easily steep into one another. And it seems like some agents have their conflict that actually stemming from the friendship part of their relationship that affected their professional partnership life. And when they don't communicate it properly, it creates those resentment. That is the third common reason why partnership failed was the lack of effective communication and avoiding difficult conversation. So many partnerships like suffer from this like lack of clear communication, especially about expectation, financial contribution, and roles. Like partners often like avoid tough conversation like a lot, and they allow the problems to fester until they become unmanageable. Oh, confrontation is a word that comes up a lot in all these transcripts. And I find it very interesting because they say if they had clear communication and constant communication, all of those conflicts shouldn't have built up to a point where their convocation was deemed to be a confrontation. Another one was a lack of clear financial agreement at the beginning of their partnership, which usually caused like confusion around financial split and responsibility. Just like without that clear structure, like financial disagreement and just unmet expectation become a major source of conflict. Like sometimes you see, oh, we start the partnership with 50-50 split. And at some point, oh, I'm doing more work than you do, or I perceive that I do more work than you do, but you're living a very good lifestyle and I'm here hustling and bustling away. That sometimes causes resentment as well. They might have an agreement at the beginning of their partnership, but they don't change it as things progress. If their workload or contributions change, the agreement doesn't get updated to reflect that.
An imbalance of contributions and workload, misaligned goals and values, and conflict avoidance all contribute to a pretty bad track record for partnership success. So what sage advice would these agents provide to anyone looking to avoid repeating their mistakes in a future partnership?
One of the advice that I like, but I don't think it's super constructive, was just to straight up don't do it. I think I see where you're coming from, but no, they all proceed to give like very constructive advice. The first advice that they give, like all of them, was to have a financial agreement or like some sort of contract that outlined very clearly what are the financial split as well as responsibilities and expectation. They also advise agents to talk about personal life priorities as well, because as we said, like the line between personal life and professional life is pretty blurry in this business. But sometimes though, I saw a few agents who mentioned that even though they have this agreement in place, things also don't work out for one reason or another. But I feel like the general advice across the board still was to have that agreement in place first and have those conversations before you start a partnership. A follow-up advice was to take your time and really vet your partner, because understanding like the partner values, work ethics, and goals are like really critical to ensure like compatibility as things move on and you get challenged. And some also recommend like having like a trial period before fully committing. And they would suggest somewhere around 6 months to a year as opposed to project based, because sometimes project based is short term and it's not quite a good limits test to uncover the challenge that you might face in the long term. And so 6 months to a year is a good time frame for that. It was also important to ensure open and honest communication. Clear and frequent communication is just like such a big part to play in like a healthy partnership. And some agents said that you should have like regular check-ins to reassess the roles, financial contribution, and any other issues that might arise. And also to revisit the contract as well to reflect and update it if anything changed. All in all, just like transparency helps build trust and prevent resentment. Aside from don't do it, there was one thing as well. That was to know when to walk away. Several agents advise that you need to be ready to end the partnership if things don't work out, like staying in a partnership just for the sake of it or just out of emotional attachment can be damaging in the long run. And having a partnership exit strategy agree upon the start also ensure like a smooth and respectful separation if necessary. And I think that's something we should also add to the contract that they should have in place when they begin a partnership. I think another solid piece of advice, like one unique suggestion, was to seek like external guidance, such as like business coach or a counselor to help manage tough conversation or like that interpersonal dynamics between the partnerships. And I think that is such a great advice as well.
Remember, Julia is a computer science student who's just starting out her career in tech. But even as the quintessential outsider, she could see some obvious issues float to the surface, as well as some pretty big holes in the industry and how we support agents in forming partnerships that are built to last.
For all of the research questions that we focus on, say the reason for entering a partnership, the common one that they both agree on was the desire for like support, collaboration, and workload management were like the key driver for entering a partnerships. But then the breakdown of partnerships often came down to like unequal contribution, different work ethics, and shifting personal priorities. I feel like their experience like just reflect like a general lack of preparation, because many of the agents who entered the partnership, they didn't quite rush into it, but definitely didn't take the time to think it through and know what to expect upon entering one. And so I guess like all of their hindsight advice was to stress like the importance of planning and setting clear expectation before you begin. That makes me wonder though, because partnership, it's not rare in real estate agents, but still there are no formal trainings or anything that they could read up on before entering one, like any booklet of advice that they could consult before getting one, was what surprised me. So advice to you, please listen to this podcast and share to those who are thinking to enter a partnership.
And that's called a call to action for all my realtor friends listening. And if a computer science student can make one, you can too in your marketing. Before I signed off with Julia, I had one more question for her. Would she consider getting into a real estate partnership herself, knowing everything she knows now?
I would say yes. Yeah, I would, for the experience of it. And I don't know, I read a quote somewhere and I feel like it's pretty nerdy. Or like, I think Jay Shetty said it, but like people come into your life for like a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And so I tend to see the positive side of it. And so I feel like if I were to enter a partnership, I would embrace the experience. And even if it doesn't work out, it builds character.
I have to say, I love Julia's outlook on partnerships. Whether they work out or not, they are an opportunity to gain valuable experience and build some character. But with the success rate so low and the emotional and financial toll that separating can take being so high, it's easy to see why many agents don't want to take the risk. But do all partnerships that end have to do so in dramatic fashion? Is it possible to have a happy breakup where the business ends and the friendship lives on? That's what we examine next. Imagine for a second, you just got your real estate license. You're sitting in your cubicle, staring at an empty inbox and a wide open calendar without any real idea on how you're going to find someone to help buy or sell a house. This is a situation that Bonnie Leard found herself in the first day she met Tony Joe.
So then the next time I show up, it's a Tuesday. And I'm sitting there thinking, what am I going to do? I had no idea. And Tony Joe comes walking in and he said, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, not great. I'm quitting. And he backed up 2 steps.
I remember the day. The company had moved into a new spot on Cedar Hill Road.
Yes.
So the building is still there. It was kind of a new spot and it was set up so it was a big sort of bullpen. I had my own office and then there was the bullpen in between. And I remember yours. Because you were kind of alone. Like there was a whole bunch of them and you were sitting there doing nothing.
Because I didn't want to be near anybody because I didn't even know what to do. So whatever his name was, Stan,
yeah,
said, move your stuff in. And I'm like,
what stuff?
What stuff? So I went to the Staples or whatever, this Monk's Office Supply, and I got a desk calendar. And I had my pager and I had my phone. I'm like, I might as well take the week off. So I took the first week off because my brother Dougie was coming in. And I was like, I'll just take the week off because I didn't know what else to do. There was nothing to show you how to be a realtor.
Yeah.
Only the book that we studied.
The catalog.
Well, yeah. And remember Arnold would sit there and read through the MLS book.
The thing about the business, more so then than it is now, it was very, very solitary. It was very lonely. I mean, now we got email, we got text, we got social media, you connect with friends and all that stuff. We didn't have that back then. Well, I want to go on tour on Tuesday. It's better to go with somebody than just to go on your own. It was a way of socialization.
And he goes, well, come with me, we'll go on tour. And it was when they was Victoria and Oak Bay.
Yeah.
And Wednesday was Saanich East, and Thursday was everything else, Sydney or whatever. And so we went together in his car, in his 350 ZX.
That's right. My little sports car.
Yeah, nice.
Oh, it was
silver.
a 300 ZX.
Oh, sorry, it's 300.
Yeah, it was a two-seater. So actually, that's the interesting thing is that nobody had a two-seat car because you needed a four-seater to drive people around.
Yeah, except that my car was a Suzuki Swift GTI.
That's right, a little hatchback.
He was going to die if he drove in my car.
300 ZX or Suzuki Swift. I bet that was an easy decision. And as Bonnie found herself riding shotgun in Tony's sports car, Tony started showing her the ropes of being a realtor.
Well, then he said, okay, he told me how to, you leave your business card and you figure out what the price might be. And the first guy we ran into was Greg on Luxton. Remember that street?
Oh, wow.
In James Bay. And he was from Saskatoon.
Okay.
Remember?
Yeah.
After a successful outing on tour, things took a quick turn from being in the passenger seat in Tony's sports car on tour to riding shotgun in a listing appointment.
Oh, no, it was more than that. We did the tour on Tuesday. And that either that night or the next night, Mr. Cudmore, we listed as you were going for a listing. He said, I'm going to do a listing, and if you'd like to come and be with me and see what I do, come on along. Well, that was his next door neighbor since he was a kid.
My mom and dad's, next door neighbor. Yeah.
And he was an older gentleman, and I'm very comfortable with older people.
Yeah.
So we started talking, and I got really comfortable with the guy, and he was so young and still shyer, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so he could see that I was already, but I was 40. I didn't have the fear of that. So, yeah.
Just because Tony was the more experienced agent doesn't mean he didn't learn things from Bonnie's life experience.
But you see, she also had the advantage of maturity, because I remember that one particular deal. Remember that gal who canceled the deal? And I can't remember what her name was. She was buying a condo, and she came up with some, crazy, I can't buy it because whatever. And in my mind, I was like, how are we going to tell the client? What are we going to do? Whatever. And Bonnie goes, just tell them. Right. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I was scared little 20-year-old for sure. Yeah. And that's what because you're like, why play around?
That reminds me of that guy that came in and he sat across the table and this guy, he wants us to list his place, and it's thousands over where it should be.
Yep.
And so Tony did all the paperwork, and he wrote out, I said, give me 2 pages. One is a change order, so you're going to change the price, or one is cancellation form. I'm like, take your pick.
Yeah.
Take your pick.
Now that young Tony has seen on multiple occasions how almost being twice his age is proving to be an advantage with some of his clients, Tony extends an opportunity to Bonnie.
What happened was he did the listing, and he said to me, I have a wedding to go to this weekend. Would you like to do the open houses? And I'm like, absolutely. And so I knew to go and sit at the open house. And by the time he came to check on how I had done between the wedding reception and when you went out, I had all these people's names and contacts that I had made in the first day and then the second day.
After showing her natural business development skills at an open house, Tony decides to throw a new challenge her way that makes some of even the most experienced agents cringe.
Then the next week I went back to the office, and I said, okay, Tony, now what do I do? And he said, call a FSBO. I'm like, what's a FSBO? He said, for sale by owner.
This is all the things that I didn't want to do.
So I call this guy, and he has 5 houses he wants us to sell. So I go and knock on his door at his little office, because I'm in the bullpen, and he's got this nice fancy office. And I said, there's a guy that wants to sell 5 houses. There's one on Fraser, yeah.
Okay,
one on Fraser, right. 3 on Witchbury,
yeah,
and his house on Constance.
It was clear that there was some chemistry here between Tony and Bonnie, but partnerships were not very common at this time, so they sought the counsel of their brokerage manager.
We both understood that the other person could take care of things, that it was the strengths and weaknesses.
definitely strengthened. Yeah, absolutely. We were absolutely the perfect match, if you ask me. Just for the differences, like he's male, I'm female. We went into a place in Esquimalt. And remember, when we come out of there, I'd been in the backyard. He went and looked at the garage, and I said to him, "Did you see that lilac tree?" He goes, "No." "Did you see that garage?" I'm like, "No."
Yes, yeah. Well, what's a lilac? Yeah.
It wasn't, I never even thought about it. I didn't even know if it was a thing in the business because I'd only been in for 2 weeks. I just knew that it was really struggling. And every time you would suggest something, I'd think, oh, that's a good idea. I'll try that. He was teaching me.
Hey, remembering I was in the business for like a year and a half before.
Yeah,
so
you
the
knew.
teacher, but the teacher was someone who himself didn't have very much experience, right?
Then he comes to me and says, "Would you like to be a full partner, like 50-50?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" It was a no-brainer when he asked me, but I had not even thought of that. So for him to come to me and say, "Do you want to be a full partner?" I'm like, absolutely. Yeah, because he went to Stan. I think you talked to Stan about us.
Yeah.
How did that ever work?
Stan just said, "This is what you do. This is how you do it." And
Yeah.
you split everything and all that kind of, I was like, "Okay.
And you do it till December, remember?
That's right.
Yeah.
Give it a try." Right. Yes.
That just meant that we worked together. We listed everything together. We sold
We
everything
just split
together.
everything. Yeah.
Expenses, and that was it. It was so fun. It was so invigorating. Like, it wasn't about any time off. It was about, let's do this and how much better can we do? I said to him, "Yeah, with your brains and my mouth, we'll go places." Right? Use the brains, and that's how it was. We partnered up, and then we started selling everything. We had 8 closings by the end of August.
We were a team.
Sounds like a dream team to me. And not just because of their amazing sales results, but how they operated and carried themselves in their day-to-day.
It just was never not fun.
Mhm.
Like, people used to say, I see you guys driving down Blanchard Street and you're killing yourself laughing. We thought you were going to smash the car. Like, we just laughed. We just laughed. It was just so fun. I lined him up with his first wife.
Yeah, there we go. Bonnie is a matchmaker.
Oh, yeah.
Because, as she said, she's the one that connected me with my
First.
ex. Yeah.
And then I knew about the second one before you even told me.
That's true. It's true.
And approved.
Yeah. We were enjoying it and money was good.
Yeah.
Things were really rolling now for Tony and Bonnie. And as their residential resale business took off, they started to get the attention of some local developers who just happened to have a building product that was ideal for Bonnie's favorite client.
We worked for a developer who was building condos for seniors that had common areas and services. It was unique at the time. Suddenly, Bonnie's skill with the seniors segment came into play because Bonnie would be doing open houses every day.
Every day.
Yeah. She would meet the lead and then phone me and go, "We got another one."
You'd write the contract for the sale.
Yep.
But then the two of us would go at night and go together.
Look at
and
the
do
house.
Yeah. Because remember we'd work all day doing whatever we were doing. And then at night we'd go out and do listings. We were working all the time.
Yeah.
Open houses by day and listing appointments by night. They were on the clock non-stop, but that didn't stop them from saying yes to another amazing development opportunity.
Yeah. It was interesting because he was the most prolific condo builder at the time, and he already had his sales guy.
So this was not seniors. Tony did a presentation to Jim Hartshorn, and that was going to be for Waterford Park. And it was it was a condo building that the builder had built, and we were going to be the listing people.
And that's when we stepped in. That was the kind of start to working with the developer. That turned into the seniors thing. It kind of all came together. Back then, we were allowed to double land. About 50% of the buyers had places to sell. From a business standpoint, like just the lead generation of that was amazing. It was like fishing out of a barrel with a shotgun. Waterford Park, we sold that out, and then they built Minton House down in
Minton
Fairfield.
House we were here already selling there, and they'd already built that.
And then we took over, and then it was a perfect fit because Bonnie was the seniors expert.
Bonnie was able to leverage her skills working with seniors yet again. But due to a slower economy, she needed to be even more innovative to sell out her next development.
But here also remember when we did take over there, they couldn't sell them. And there was, I think, 11 left or something like that. And we just looked and I said, you know what? 89-year-olds don't want to move because they don't have buddies with their trucks and and they got lawnmowers and stuff from 50 years ago, and it's overwhelming. So we added in changing places moving service, and they added it into the price of the house and just upped it.
Yeah.
So it was included.
Downsizing moving service.
Downsizing, packing, moving. They didn't have to lift a finger. They could be in their house and everything was taken care of. And then they'd move in and sit down and watch them unpack everything in their house. And it was all done in one day.
Yeah, that was a Bonnie idea because I remember you told Shirley, you suggested that to Shirley who ran it, and it took the stress out of the move, and it was brilliant. And
they all sold right away.
From mission impossible to commission possible, Tony and Bonnie sold out that development, which led to the next one. By this time, they had their systems dialed and they got to deploy them to a new development that hadn't broken ground yet. A new experience for them.
Did they give us the other ones afterwards?
Towards the end, but remember we did Rosebank Gardens.
Okay, so Rosebank Gardens was interesting because it was 42 units and 16 townhouses.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that was our first from scratch development. It was neat because we were there, remember the empty lot, and we saw the buildings and all that stuff. And I remember doing the paperwork for all of those listings.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot.
That was when you probably wanted to go, I need to do a different partner.
But the thing is, though, like that sold really quickly.
Yeah.
You got all the townhouses sold.
Yeah.
And then we probably had 25 houses, like spin-off houses.
Oh, totally.
It was unbelievable. Like that was fantastic. We had a good system there.
Their business model started leading to some burnout, and Bonnie had two different challenges on the home front that started putting strain on their partnership.
Remember we were saying we were doing 7 days a week.
Just the notion of kind of being able to be in two places at once, right?
I remember you complaining to me about that because you used to say, we're wasting time if we're doing both together.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you can't leave me, so forget it.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. Because we would go to listing appointments together and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I was saying. It's like we could do more.
I know.
Yeah.
We probably could, but I was a big chicken.
The other thing though too is Dave at the time was feeling you were working too much.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was an ex-boyfriend.
I got the sense that he sort of had the idea that you were doing all the work and maybe I wasn't pulling my weight there. There was a day when you said, whatever, Ginger's out of the house. This is great. We have an empty house, right? And then a week later, it's like, oh, I'm going to be a grandmother.
Yeah, it happened. So Ginger had my grandson, Matthew, and I just felt guilty.
You want to spend time with them. There was a shift there.
Because your kids, you can kind of work around your kids, but your grandkids, you just want to be with them. I wanted to spend time with them, but I felt like the market wasn't very good.
Bonnie really liked being a realtor, but she loved being a grandma. But there was also a housing crisis on the horizon that would shake the real estate industry in BC to its foundation, or maybe more accurately, to its stucco.
We also bumped into the condo stuff because we had Broadmead.
Oh, yeah.
Boulderwood Rise. Which was a hard sale. They gave us a number of developments, and this was near the end. And we knew stuff was going on because, remember, they started demanding stuff. The attitude changed. Things weren't selling because it was tough. They were luxury condos. And Camelot down in James Bay couldn't sell those. We had a falling out with the developer. And I think that was largely because of the market, and the realtors are usually the casualties there.
I think it was just after we broke up our partnership.
Unlike so many failed partnerships I've witnessed that ended pretty dramatically, this separation was more than smooth. It was celebrated.
Was it 7 years?
7 full years, like almost coming up to 8.
But you know, it's funny because when you think about it, 7 doesn't sound long. But I remember when we were in the middle of it, it was because it was fun. I understood, right? Like we're close. We get it, right? I mean, she's as much a part of the family with my family and all that kind of stuff.
I just remember thinking I just want to have more time with Matthew.
Yeah.
And the market was tough.
There was no fanfare. It was kind of like it was and then it wasn't. And we're in the same brokerage. So like that never changed.
We just kind of divided up clients and it just worked out.
There were people that like I had very little interaction with. I couldn't claim anything.
Yeah.
Right.
But then there was people that came from your family background.
Yeah.
So we just kind of went through it and went, there you go.
If only every partnership that ended did so in such an amicable manner. So I had to ask them why they thought they had such a successful breakup.
Respect.
Yeah, both ways.
Full on respect for the person, the situation, everything.
I never felt disgruntled about us together or about you or any of this. And you know what? I have felt that way with team members.
I think about you all the time. I think about Tony.
We'll have funny things and message each other and oh my God. I mean, that just reminds me of the day that she got me the belly dancer for my birthday.
Yeah. He was 24.
Probably.
Because you were 23 when I met you. He was 24 and this lady comes in and all his buddies were there.
At my house. I'm all shy and stuff.
And this belly dancer's right in his face. Like this. I'll send him a belly dancer.
And this is before social media. Yeah, thanks, partner.
Yeah.
At this stage in the project, I found myself feeling pretty conflicted. On one hand, I could see the undeniable benefits of having the right partner to share the load with. But on the other, the cautionary tales we uncovered in our research were hard to ignore. Here's something I didn't mention earlier. Not only did the majority of ex-partners refuse to sit across from each other to be interviewed, but many wouldn't even speak to me off the record. It was just too painful to relive. If real estate is truly a relationship business, the fact that so many friendships, and in some extreme cases, families, were torn apart alongside the business is something I can't turn a blind eye to. So what now? How do I find the upside of a partnership without the massive risk of losing so much? That's where I turn to a series of experts to help me unpack their perspectives on building a partnership that's built to last. In the next episode, we'll hear from one of Canada's top business coaches on how to structure a partnership for long-term success.
You have to decide when you create the business plan what each person is great at.
A real estate lawyer who breaks down the core components of a rock-solid partnership agreement.
Yeah, the purpose of that agreement is to govern the two parties' working relationship and business relationship from start to finish. That's the goal of having a good partnership agreement in place.
And because many agents describe their partnership like a second marriage, we sit down with a marriage counselor to talk about how to repair a relationship that's hit a rough patch.
If you want a successful business partnership that is going to last for a decade or longer, your desire to communicate effectively, to have your self-awareness, to know your goals and values has to be very high, an 8 or higher, or you shouldn't go into partnership. It's like deciding to get married.
Thank you for listening to Season 1 of Reflections, the power and peril of real estate partnerships. If you are a little more curious about whether a partnership is worth pursuing, please do yourself a favor and take our quiz, How Partner Ready Are You? By checking out the link in our show notes or on the podcast page of my website, or simply by DMing me the word partner1 on Instagram. That's the word partner, all lowercase with the number 1 on Instagram. Make sure you stay tuned for the bonus episodes, which are lightly edited full-length versions of the interviews we did on this project, except for the anonymous ones. Don't worry, your secrets are safe with me. Thank you again for listening to Reflections. I'm broker owner and business coach Braden Wheatcroft. Coach B out.